So I grew up in Chennai. I was born in Amritsar, studied in Chennai, and HR just happened. For me, it was never a conscious career decision to get into HR. As HR people, we really go through sometimes incidents that could have happened within our teams, outside of our teams, etc. So it's always easier because you are in a position of influence and authority, and you are able to navigate those challenges. But at times, when you are exposed to such behavior yourself, the first thing you do is to lean on colleagues around you, right? And the least that you expect of them is to really have a spine. So I think missing of that spine is a lot more prevalent. And that comes as a shocker only when you are exposed to it yourself.
Prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace effectively.
What we sometimes miss is the absolute implementation, is to really call out situational behaviors which we don't realize, but we become very accepting of those. How do you really create a calendarization of regularly having these conversations, of bringing up your code of conduct and your prevention of sexual harassment or behaviors that can constitute towards all of this?
What's your favorite book?
Osho. So I love what he writes. And other than that, I love Haruki Murakami. I love Simon Sinek.
Favorite quote?
Do the right thing. I mean, I don't know whoever wrote that, but whoever wrote that is in my mind. So I think two statements that I really think of each time. One is do the right thing and the other is bring your true self to work. So I think these two just resonate with me a lot of time. My daughter is going to beat me for it, but happiness these days to me at my personal space is my four-legged baby that I've adopted. I am doing absolutely everything that I like doing. I love the challenges, I love the pain, I love the stress. I love the ability to be able to influence and make change.
Welcome to Office Tales and People podcast. I'm Shikha Mittal and I have my co-host Priyanka Gidwani. We both have today Ambika Wadhwa, who's currently CHRO at Gourmet Investments, a Bharti venture. Welcome, Ambika.
Thank you, Shikha.
Welcome to the show, Ambika.
Thank you, Priyanka.
We're so excited to have you, and we're really honored that you've agreed to do this with us today. I want to start with Ambika, knowing a little bit about your journey, your entire, right from your school, college, what has made a difference, what has impacted your life. If you can share that journey with our audience, it'll be great.
I feel very, very honored to be part of this conversation. So I grew up in Chennai. I was born in Amritsar, studied in Chennai, and HR just happened. For me, it was never a conscious career decision to get into HR. And it so happened that I actually got married very early in life. So right after graduation, I got married, moved to Delhi. So moving base from Chennai to Delhi was a big cultural difference, and it was a shock kind for me because the two states are very, very different. And I know
it's two states.
Yeah, it's the two states, absolutely.
Yeah.
And got married into a business class family. So obviously never really thought of pursuing a career outside home, etc. There was a business in the family to look at. But I wanted to pursue something outside of my own. And I saw an opportunity with a recruitment consulting firm. And that's when I understood what were the basics of HR and how do you really start your journey thereof. So I walked into this organization called Unison International through an advertisement over Naukri.com. And that was how the entire journey and everything else is history. So spent good 5 years with them, understood. That was a time when e-commerce was booming into India. That was a time when LinkedIn was coming into India. So at that point in time, just getting exposed to a very different kind of networking, because you would start recruitments with calling people on board lines and then poaching, etc., and moving to a socially active world, which was just evolving. So very, very fortunate to have been a part of that. So started my HR journey from there, then moved on to join Rocket Internet, a Germany-based organization that had Jabong, Food Panda, Office Yes, Fab Furnish kind of organizations. And that was where my career started, where I started reporting into CEOs and CXOs. So throughout these 17, 18 years of my career, I haven't reported into HR heads, but have always partnered with CEOs and CXOs. At one point in time, I had 14, 15 CXOs that I was reporting into because that was the number of ventures that Rocket Internet had.
Wow.
So I think the experience working with with CXOs and managing them at one point in time was, I think, the biggest change in my life, because when you're exposed to so many seniors at in one go, I think the way we start thinking, uh, changes, because the different ventures were of different sizes. There was something that was at a startup. There was Jabong, which was a big baby of ours. So different journeys, but there were some policies you could copy. There were some you had to look at business need and then really build. So I think that learning, that journey was very, very helpful. And uh, and I think thanks to all those 16, 17 CXOs, co-founders, who really helped shape, because uh, as an HR head, you think differently. As a CEO, as a co-founder and a CEO, you tend to think differently. Of course, now the lines have really merged, and today HR heads also think a lot like CXOs. But at that point in time, when our careers were starting, to very different. From there, moved on to join IGP.com, then joined Uber, and then Reliance Brands, and today Gourmet. So I think the journey across multiple organizations has been very, very different.
So Uber was a global one, right?
That's
Moving
correct.
from like a Indian organization to global. So how was that experience?
I think it was fantastic, Priyanka, because the organizations operate very differently. Global organizations tend to teach us how verticalization happens, and how designation and titles don't matter anymore, because what could be relevant to your geography is not relevant to the others. And it helps you evolve. It helps you evolve in ways where you stop focusing on whether you're a manager or a senior manager or an executive, because you're very responsible for your own vertical.
Right.
And that learning is like an eye opener, especially, as employees, we always aim to get a title or a designation or a team, and global organizations teach you lean teams, they teach you verticalization, and they then tell you how they seamlessly marry, uh, and how geographies are no longer boundaries, right? So I think that learning is.
So I have a follow-up question: that is there anything that Indian organizations have to teach to the global organizations?
Yeah,
Is
I
there
think
something that we can
agility.
teach to them?
Agility.
Yeah, I think
Agility.
agility
Yeah.
is
I
a big
think,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
the jugaad
Correct,
and getting
absolutely.
things done
Yeah.
without getting stuck. Yeah.
Yeah,
Too
no,
jugaadu.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think they both have their pros and cons, right? With Indian organizations, the speed to deliver, the agility, etc., decision making is a lot more quicker.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Global is more process oriented,
yes,
they'll follow every step that is supposed to be followed.
Right. Right. Awesome. So I have a follow-up question after what Priyanka wanted to know about you.
okay.
Is that you have worked with so many organizations, whether it was Uber, Reliance, Campus Shoes, now Gourmet, a Bharti Venture. I want to ask you top 2 learnings of your journey that you would like to share with our listeners.
I think the first one is to avoid any kind of shortcuts. I think that's a learning that I've had, that you know not following the most ethical or the most compliant manner while we are in the pursuit of growth sometimes seems easier, and sometimes is a very natural reflex to a lot of our decision making when we are growing as organizations. But I think just stopping, taking stock of what our actions could have as repercussions in future, because you're not building something for a few years, you're actually investing to build an organization. So I think that is a learning that I've taken over these years, to not really take shortcuts. I don't know. I think the second one is just bringing your true self to work. Yeah, I think it's about authenticity, who you are as an individual, and are you really part of that growth journey? Is it together that you and the organization are able to build what I think it's about a common value system that you end up identifying for yourself, so that your work is not work. It's your everyday living. So it's an extension of who you are. And I think if that is something as employees, as people, we are able to generate, I think we're happier as individuals.
Nice.
I think we quite resonate
yeah,
with
like
that. Yeah.
highly
I
our
do
kind
see
of
both of you.
our kind of value system. So
Yeah.
we definitely resonate with that.
So I wanted to know that, since you've worked with so many CXOs at one time and even across all your organization, you must have seen so many different leadership styles. So which are those styles? Which are the ones, which you really learned and want to carry forward, or you have adopted it as your style?
Priyanka, I think there is no real single leadership style, right? As much as our MBAs, as much as research and psycho studies tell us.
Yeah.
I think leaderships evolve. And
Yeah.
it's very dynamic. In the boardroom, probably my style would be very different because
Sure.
the teams that I'm addressing could have the gravitas to take a different style of leadership,
Right.
while another forum, which could probably be a factory visit or a store visit, could be more inspirational and motivational because that's typically the team that you're addressing. So I think as individuals and as leaders, we tend to adopt depending on the situations. But I think personally, I like tough love as a leadership style,
Okay.
which is to say, okay, I'm going to push you really, really hard, and I have your back. Just
Right.
the kind that our parents are for us. They let us do whatever we want to do. Let us do it our way. They know that we are going to fall and tumble, and they guide us, but they're okay for us to fall and learn. So I think that tough love is the
Well
kind
said.
of
I like the
leadership I
term.
like.
Yeah, I
You know,
also
tough
love the
love. I love it.
I
Yeah.
love the term tough love.
Yes.
So I think it's going to be new term for the corporate world at least.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Ambika, I have a very interesting question right now. That in fact, Ambika and Priyanka, I have worked with both of you as partners, and you've been in the lead HR roles. This question actually is for both for you.
Really? I have to
And-
get ready now.
That do you think that HRs have got all the power to protect the company employees and to make workplaces safe? What's your take on it? I'll start with Ambika now that she's our
Sure.
guest.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I don't know if HR is solely powerful, right? And I say this because there's HR, there's the CXO team, and then there's the leadership team, and then there are managers who are responsible for each of their team members, right? So I think HR solely cannot be powerful enough to be responsible to control behaviors of individuals. And what HR can probably do is influence the workplace policies, uh, build a culture where there is a discussion around acceptable behaviors, unacceptable behaviors, what is really the principle that defines the organization, right? And where is it that you draw a line to acceptable behaviors? I think that definition is probably the ownership and the place where HR has the power to influence versus the behaviors, because I'm sure three of us have seen enough and more behaviors out of our control, despite being in very, very authoritative and positions of influence.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Priyanka, what's your take?
So what I think, Shikha, is, they do have the power, like, Ambika said, to influence policies, etc. But I think there is a challenge where HR themselves don't sometimes have the confidence to speak up in those situations.
So in fact, HR needs to be very courageous also, is
Yes.
what you're
So
saying.
I think there is more requirement of courage than power.
Wow.
So you
okay.
need to have the
Yeah.
courage, then you have to speak up, then you have to be able to write those policies and have those conversations on the table.
Right.
So I think they many a times get stuck in the first one of not having the courage.
Interesting. Okay.
know?
Thank you to both of
Yeah.
you
No,
for
I think that's a
answering
very,
me
very-
on this. This is a, I mean, sort of a, I think, tough question.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for giving me more insight.
Many a times HR is expected to protect the people, have these policies that we've just spoken about. But many a times they could be victims as well. Have you ever experienced anything like that, and how have you dealt with it? Or is there anything that you would want to share in terms of learnings?
And in fact, I want to know on follow up what she's asked, that if what emotions did you go through and how did you navigate those emotions, and managed your job to be more effective, to be honest to your people. How did you navigate all that?
No, thank you for asking this, Priyanka. I mean, it's when there are direct questions, and because we are HR folks, there's little that you want to manipulate around, right? So I'll actually answer this in ways that I can. As HR people, we really go through sometimes incidents that could have happened within our teams, outside of our teams, etc. So it's always easier because you are in a position of influence and authority, and you are able to navigate those challenges. But at times when you are exposed to such behavior yourself, the first thing you do is to lean on colleagues around you, right? It could be your peer group, it could be your seniors, and the least that you expect of them is to really have a spine. So I think missing of that spine is a lot more prevalent, and that comes as a shocker only when you are exposed to it yourself, because a lot of times you are the spine and you are confident about your own self as a spine, right, to multiple people that deal with such harassment or bad behavior or any kind of sexual harassment, right? it doesn't uh, you don't shy away from doing the right thing at that point in time, whether it is internal committees, external support, so on and so forth. But when it comes to yourself, you are leaning on a lot of leadership support, and a lot of times I've noticed that the same leadership team, that could probably be very influential in creating those so-called policies for workplace, don't really want to go by the book when it comes to really
themselves are not implementing
yes,
it, you know.
especially because for something to happen at that level, there would have to be somebody at another influential position to be involved.
Right.
And if that happens, uh, then that's when the tussle starts, because if there's somebody at an influential position and somebody who's not, uh, there are two things that can happen. Either the person gets justice by ensuring that he or she has identified alternate influencers in the leadership team, or or they are themselves confident enough to fight it out for themselves, right? So the two things anyways resolve the problem. I think the bigger problem is when there are two people at similar levels, and that's when the challenge really comes for people who are in the higher authority than those two individuals. But it's all happening at the leadership levels.
So, Ambika, what's your message for women specifically who are in the leadership roles like yourself? How should they navigate a situation where they themselves are the victims because they are the spine, like you said?
Yeah.
And if their spine is broken, how can they be the supporters for others? And what is your suggestion and advice to such women leaders?
What naturally happens when a situation like this comes up, we tend to go into our own shells, right? We forget that we have that we are actually responsible for the remaining folks. Suddenly we start questioning our own selves. Is it really, did we really stand up for everybody always? Did we not? And things like those. And then you're also wanting to check whether you have the courage in yourself to stand up for yourself. So I think at that point in time, what is most important is probably not going into your own shell, identifying your own strength. And thirdly is also identifying your ecosystem, because I remember it was probably easier on myself and for me because I had a few partners, right? I mean, Shikha is one of them. And when you lean on people who are able to clinically assess the situation and tell you to not really feel victimized because of a certain situation, but to look at it in a clinical way, the way you would look at an alternate situation, right? And not really be boggled by the sheer fact that you are having to live this or go through this alone. So there were people like Shikha, there have been people like my other colleagues at workplace and mentors outside of workplace who helped navigate that situation.
So I think it's so important to have the
Yes.
ecosystem, right?
Absolutely.
And what she said, I want to share with you also, Priyanka, that I think when we learn to step out of our own position and look at ourselves
Yeah.
from an outside perspective, which I've learned from theatre, I think it really changes the way we deal with a situation
Absolutely. Yeah.
which is so grave. Hence, it's my suggestion to every victim who could turn themselves into crusaders is to look at a situation from outside perspective and become a third person for your own situation, right?
Yeah.
I think what also helps, Shikha, I've seen is what we need to remember as HR is the rest of the organization is watching you.
Yeah.
Whether you're taking a stance for yourself or not.
Or not. Brilliant.
As HRs, if you don't take a stand for yourself, they will never believe that you'll take it for them.
And then they will never trust the
Exactly.
leaders.
That's very, very well said, Priyanka.
So, Ambika, I want you to answer for all the new employees who are joining the corporate world. What are some obvious toxic culture signs that they can look for before joining an organization that you can call out and guide them?
Okay, I think there are many, and I'm sure we've all experienced different different forms of toxicity. Uh, but I think the major call outs are probably an ecosystem where there's no HR, right? So I think that's like the first one. And I've experienced that across different organizations. I know people who've experienced that lack of HR and like lack of people policy. So that's the first call out. A lot of times we promote behaviors where, startups say that, we don't have an HR, this is what we do, this is what we build, and hence our policies are not in place, and any kind of language is allowed, any kind of behavior is allowed. And a lot of casualness starts to come in. So when we talk about bringing our authentic self, there is also a very thin line to separate and segregate the casualness of our language, the casualness of our tonality, right?
A lot of people, I think, bring the college, what is it called?
Lingo.
Campus to corporate.
Yeah.
Literally campus to corporate in terms of the way
Yes.
they talk, the way they behave. They literally carry it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I think they forget to grow up. You may want to just cut that.
No.
no, I mean, I think it's not about growing up. It's about not really knowing that when we are shifting from our college to corporate,
There
the
is-
culture is different.
Yes.
And
They need to adapt
Yes, they
to
need
the
to.
new environment
Yes.
and change themselves accordingly.
I think it's not change, probably it's also evolve
Sure.
in a way, right? We all have to
I think
evolve.
she said grow rightly,
Yeah.
because we need to all grow up and
We
really,
need to grow up while keeping our inner child also alive.
That
right?
I agree.
So,
That I very much
which-
agree. Yeah.
Which can never die in me, at least.
No,
Not
I'm
in you,
sure,
and not in
absolutely.
you. Maybe that's why I'm so comfortable with
Yeah.
people like you.
Right.
And that's what, I just want you to continue on some other points that you'd like to share on toxicity.
I think the absence of HR was definitely one of them. The second is also anywhere that we cite preferential treatment as a way of life, right? I think in my mind, that's a big deterrent, because then there is a certain group or a certain cohort where decision making is taking place. And these are signs. You get to know that there is a certain cohort where decisions are taking place, which means that is going to cascade like that private group where preferential treatments could be given. And how does one create an atmosphere of making it inclusive? So I think there's always going to be a small group that makes decisions, but how do you really encourage people to contribute to that decision making? I think culturally, if you're able to see that, it's a good sign. And if you're not able to see it, I think is a red flag for me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But Shikha, what happens is many a times from the outside, you don't come to know
Yeah.
very much initially, because there's only the good side of the organization, which the organization puts out, right? And therefore, you will see in many organizations, there's always early attrition. Because when they come in, that's when they realize quickly in 3-6 months that I don't like this culture. And that's why actually mostly you will see very high early attrition in your 0 to 6 months. But, for example, what I did is when I was joining an organization, I wanted to know about inclusion, how inclusive, how much into inclusion is the organization. So I went and looked up the website, right, of the organization, and I saw there was already a woman leader in the leadership team. So that sort of gave me a comfort that, okay, there is already a woman leader at the top. So when I go in, I will also get that seat
Have
at the
that
table.
platform.
Yeah, and have that seat at the table. So
Right.
that sort of gave me the confidence.
But it's a very interesting point.
So it depends on what people want to know of
Right.
the organization. There are ways they can go and look,
Right.
or nowadays there is all of these websites, Glassdoor and all, where employees go and put feedback about the organizations they've worked in.
Right.
So, you can go and look
I mean,
that
a
up.
lot of times I've heard that on places like Glassdoor, the competitors go and make fake IDs and write
Yeah.
something negative.
Possibly, but there are many a times
There are,
employees also.
yeah, of course, of
but
course.
the flip side to that is only somebody who's unhappy normally goes and writes.
Correct.
There's so much right that goes on in the organization as well.
And nobody writes
But
about
that
that.
nobody
I
is
was just about
writing.
to
you
say
know.
that.
So that challenge is there on how do you come to know before.
Yeah.
I think what happens is they more come to know in that 0 to 6 months when they decide whether they want to continue with us, and the organization decides whether they are the right fit, I guess.
Right.
And I think it's also different triggers for you to join different organizations,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for me, if something wasn't broken, I wouldn't find myself actually excited by that
Right.
organization.
Right.
And it could be anything, right? It could be the HR piece, it could be the people piece, it could be the business piece, it could be the growth piece,
Some
right?
challenge.
Yeah, I mean, with everything beautifully running,
Doesn't.
I'm not sure if that's the
No,
place.
and it's a myth that everything is beautifully running in any organization. It's not possible that all organizations, everything is fine, which is what.
And what will be the fun going into an organization which
They
has
all have
every
challenges.
engine going on or running on pretty well?
Yeah, but you should have your ticks, like
Yeah.
like
Correct.
ethics, inclusion, how we treat people,
Correct.
what are the values,
Right.
is there respect for people,
Culture, and the way
culture
people...
nahi pata chalega.
nahi
That's
pata
my
chalega,
problem,
yeah.
Shikha,
Yeah.
from the outside. Before joining nahi pata chalega.
Haan.
And I also think culture has a lot to do with who are the people inside who are actually contributing as micro contributors. Right?
Correct.
There are those leadership folks, there are those micro contributors, and you don't know what are their unhappiness triggers, right?
Correct.
Now, and from which place are they stemming? Are they really right for the organization or not?
Yeah.
So what you see as the culture from outside could actually be a picture portrayed by folks who are, like you said, there's competition doing it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there are internal folks doing it.
Correct.
And we've seen that across different organizations,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and you don't realize those till you are part of it. So as HR folks, a lot of times you are privy to so much more information that you're able to see through how the culture is being driven and who are the promoters and the detractors together. And
Yeah.
So a small point here, like I am a partner to, let's say, an organization that you're working in. I have started doing something on culture check before coming into a contract with organization. For example, I will try and find out another partner that they are working with, and I've started reaching out to them, wanting to know that does this company pay on time? Do they treat you well like partners or not? Do they really respect you enough or not?
Right.
So that kind of culture check I have started doing because I have burnt my hands too many times now in last 14 years of running Be.artsy that it has really left me hurt too many times. So I just feel that this also applies to employees.
I don't know.
And when I have
for
another
me, I
thing...
think differently.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it would only be about the two people that I'm going to be working with. One, my manager, and two, the top leadership person of the organization. I think if I'm able to spend a lot of time with them before joining, at least aligning on the philosophy, because what is there in the organization is really for us to solve and build together, right? But if the 3-4 people who are going to work together and who are part of the organization and who are part of their entire influence circle to say, if we are all in philosophy aligned, then I'm sure the basics are going to go right. It's only then a matter of time.
And if basics are not right, you'll fix it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're there to fix it.
Correct.
But I
Which is
must
why
tell
you're
you,
taking it.
sometimes you spot that basics are right and you work along many months and maybe years. One fine day, the same person's basics would be suddenly different because the circumstance changed and suddenly the person is going to be against you. Something like that can happen.
So, Shikha, you talking from the lens of an outsider vendor is very different and should probably have more antennas than somebody who's getting in, because our roles typically are very functional.
So this point, I said it from the internal point of view, from a friend who, was at a very senior leader position and was dealing with the management. I'm saying from that perspective that I am seeing too many stories internally. Like, I know many things from you both as
lot
leaders.
of organizations that I have joined, if I were to go on Glassdoor, I would have never joined, right? If I were to speak to ex-employees, I would have never joined. And hence, I prevent doing all of that. My only lens is to say, okay, is the philosophy on HR and people aligned to the basics that I want to operate on?
So I must congratulate you on one thing, which I want to share with everyone as well, is that what Ambika is doing is that she's not letting biases of others let her decide what she should be doing, and she's open to learning about her new opportunities without letting others' biases,
creep into hers.
into her decision, which is a brilliant news for me.
But there's another side. Like I did the same thing in one of my organizations. So one is I went and looked up whether there's already a woman on the board. I went and looked up Glassdoor as well, and I did see all the negative comments. But my reaction was, oh wow, that means I need to fix all of this.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
for
that's
me,
another perspective.
yeah. So
Yes.
I looked at it like that I'm going in with my eyes open. I know what needs to be fixed first.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. At least from the basics. Who are the people who actually go and write on Glassdoor? It's not your senior leadership.
Of course.
It is the people down the line. So you already know what they're paying for.
Yeah.
And you know what are your quick wins.
Yeah.
That if I go in,
Yeah.
I do this, and I've done this so many times, and I know people will be happy.
Right.
So there is that side as well. So
No,
it
absolutely. I
depends.
think what I meant was, while you look at all this, you look at it as an awareness, and you
Yes.
don't look at it as a deterrent.
Yes, you don't allow it to
Yes.
creep in, like she said, as a bias. That also I agree.
Okay, so Ambika, you've worked with Uber, you've worked with Reliance Campus, now here at Bharti Venture. Have you changed any approach of yours when you're developing workplace safety policies? And if you have changed any of your perspective or the ways you're building up policies, would you like to share some of your approach?
I think not so much in the policy formulation, because I think typically we know what goes into a policy formulation from a place where individuals were defining policies, to a place where HR team was defining policies, to a place where focus group discussions started taking place to understand who are the recipients, how are they feeling, and what is it that you want as redressal mechanisms. I think that evolution has functionally happened. Right. I think what I have done probably differently across organizations has been establishing my own teams across different touch points with employees. Right. What that means is that there have been HR folks who work on the shop floors. There are HR folks and trainers who work on factory floors. There are people who work on the field. And then there's an extension of the operations teams who are on the ground really. So while there is this entire HR team and the trainers who are directly, working closely with you, become your eyes and ears to tell you if there are those micro triggers or micro aggressive behaviors that really come within our working styles. How do you catch them early on, and how do they come back to you in an absolute narrative without really putting somebody in a spot, but helping you identify how your teams are feeling? I think that has evolved over the organizations that I have worked. So there are multiple touch points now from where you keep getting these feelers and triggers. And what it helps is it doesn't prevent people from reaching out to you directly or indirectly, because they know that you're not going to really take an action instantly, but you're going to ensure that any of those microaggressive behaviors are caught early on. And how do you add their redressals in the policies that you formulate, or in your next visits, how are you addressing them? Because there are some behaviors for which you don't want to issue warning letters. You don't want to issue conversations or involve managers or people and make it more obvious, and let an employee feel like he or she has done something majorly wrong. But you want to send a subtle message to say, you might just want to check on your behavior. And I think those small checks probably work or help us evolve with our policy.
So I have a follow-up question. In fact, I would like you to answer, and after that you also, because on this topic I've worked with both of you very deeply. What's your advice to the CHROs or the head HRs on implementing prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace effectively?
One is, of course, what we do as regular checks, right? You join in, you do a certain training, and you get a certification, and you do a follow-up a year later, and organizations do it twice a year. So that's the hygiene part of it. But I think what we sometimes miss is the absolute implementation, is to really call out situational behaviors which we don't realize, but we become very accepting of those as managers, as people, and as operations teams, right? Because very casually you will find folks communalizing things or talking about groups or sectors and so on and so forth. So how do you really create a calendarization of regularly having these conversations, of bringing up your code of conduct and your prevention of sexual harassment or behaviors that can constitute towards all of this in a regular setting, calendarizing it on the back end, but not really formalizing it. So, you're able to influence behaviors without really making it a training session, right? And I think what you do beautifully is that entire Nukkad piece, right? I mean, so beautifully you actually bring about appraisal conversations where you are not really pushing an individual to feel that he or she has not gotten enough recognition, because I remember there was a certain example, right, that you gave, an ex-employee being pushed by a Y employee against their common manager just to achieve some ulterior motive. So how do you really create that ecosystem without calling out names, without calling out behaviors, but in a subtle manner, ensuring that you are able to again identify and imply what is acceptable? So I think those are small learnings that probably have evolved. And I'm
Thanks.
sure she'll have
No,
more.
that's lovely. So, you know what, I would like to just add in my experience, Shikha, two things. One is, actually it's one because she spoke about your Nukkad Natak. So one of the things which I have done in my experience is the different organizations. You know, I've worked in services, in hospitality, in FMCG. So what I did is every organization I worked with, I adapted examples. I picked up each clause of the code of conduct or the sexual harassment and made examples of that organization. What can happen in an hospitality which is actually violation of XYZ clause, right? So explaining to them with the example which is relevant to that industry, I think that really helps. When you're in hotels, give a hotel's example that in this hotel environment, this is what could happen, and therefore you need to have your antenna up when this happens, right? So one is create examples on every clause which is relevant to the industry, and second is go down to the last mile to explain it. And if that is needed, even if it is needed in the local language, like what we did at Tata Coffee, right? We went to the plantations, to the last worker who is picking coffee, and we explained to them in their language what no means no.
So Ambika, we both have done this in like a huge project with Tata Coffee when she was the CHRO there. So, we both traveled all 14 locations. She insisted me to come along with her, even at the places where I don't speak Tamil, but I spoke in Hindi.
And somebody else translated.
And somebody else translated. And I was training. And the way we collaborated, we reached to the last mile. And
explain to them, and because only when they understand will they be able to speak up, and
we did local language street theaters.
Yeah.
We made sure that the local people in the plantation understand exactly what the Tata Coffee corporate team wants to say.
And therefore that made the environment for them safe. Plantations, once it's dark and all in the evening can be very scary, right? So made that environment
Priyanka, you
safe.
remember that one lady came to me and you were standing next to me and she said, "Aap har mahine ek baar aa jaya karo." And she hugged me, cried,
motivated them.
It just made her feel safe
and gave her that confidence that in this organization you can speak up.
Yeah.
If the organization has bothered to go to the last mile in their language, do a street play to explain to them, I think. Because many organizations have seen, yes, we have gone to that step where we should have the policy in multi-language, but it's only translated and kept on the intranet.
Yeah.
Right.
How much are you going and actually explaining
Nobody
in that language?
But what I think, that while there is an influence in that sector, in that organization, and with various other organizations that we do our work, but what we do more is how these women go back home.
Yeah.
It makes them very different, powerful versions of themselves. And that's where I think our purpose becomes even more defined, because in a corporate setup, some or the other way they are going to get trained, right? But if we are to physically be with them or impart training in ways that touches them, they're going to be very different women at home, and they're going to raise up their children very differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's the joy and purpose of really doing this.
Hmm.
So that
So-
woman who came and hugged you,
Hmm.
imagine what it would have meant for her to go back to her place. I
A
have known
woman
women
hugged
cry.
me, but another woman came and she took, an autograph kind of a thing and said, write something for my daughter,
Yeah.
and I will give this diary to her and tell her about this training that happened. And this happened to me in Polybeta,
Yeah, yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wrote a message and she said, Madam, you write in English because my daughter can read and write in
So
English.
she's studying in an English school. Yeah.
You write something for her and I want to give this to her today. And I actually went back to my room and I cried. And it has been a journey which is so satisfying. I know it's a very small impact, but
No, it makes a big difference.
No,
For
I
them, it
think
was a big one,
For
actually.
every one person that you touch, you should just multiply it tenfold.
Yes.
Because that's the impact that every
has.
woman or a man will have in their lives, right? I mean, with whatever we experience, the 5 people that we spend time with and the extension 5. So 10x is what you should
Yeah.
really look at your
Yes.
impact with everything that
Yes.
you do. So Shikha, I have one question to ask of you. You work with hundreds of organizations, and what is it that you would really suggest HR leaders do to strengthen their prevention of sexual harassment policies, or trainings, or what is it that they should do which really ensures and imparts the absolute message that we've been talking about to all our team members?
of course, I have been very fortunate to work with a lot of organizations, and I think I have a few suggestions. The first being prevention of sexual harassment is not an event. Organizations have been treating it as one-off event. They come, they do one awareness, one training, and they'll be like, okay, ho gaya. Awareness, sensitization, and consciously making people, exhibit that behavior is a process.
It's a continuous
It's
process.
a continuous process. It's a journey for an organization, and they should not take it very lightly. In fact, they should not take it lightly at all.
Yeah.
And they should not consider, my another advice is that they should not consider this as a compliance activity.
Yeah.
That is my first and foremost advice. And the other is that over communication is highly important when it comes to prevention of sexual harassment or any kind of harassment at the workplace. And another important thing is that organizations will say, oh, jo udhar kiya tha wahi aake idhar kar do. That's not how
It works.
culture is built when it comes to safety at work. Every organization will have some peculiarities. Pick those peculiarities, convert them into examples, talk about those examples with your people so that they can relate to it. And that's when you roll out your trainings and awareness programs and make it more humane, make it more real, make it more connecting. That's what is very, very important. And yes, take care of people's emotions. That's another thing that I really want to say, that don't do it for the heck of it. Don't do it because legally you have to do it. Don't do it because you have to do the tick mark.
Yeah.
Do it because you should be doing it.
Because it's the right thing to
It's
do.
the right thing to do. You do it because that's when and that's how you make workplace safe.
I just want to add here, Shikha and Ambika, I think one of the other myths we need to break here of leadership and HRs is, I think they don't over communicate because they worry is the minute I do a lot of awareness.
Stop worrying.
No, I'll tell you what happens. They worry that there'll be a lot of complaints that will come.
Let
it
them
happens.
come.
Yes, it happens, and a lot of complaints come, and that's what myth we need to break, that let them come. Once you do address these, and once you've made some examples out of it, it will settle and it will become part of your culture and DNA. That no means no,
And,
right?
and a lot
So-
of times, the lot of complaints that comes is also because most of the employees do not understand the difference between what sexual harassment is versus indisciplinary act versus harassment at the workplace. So
Correct.
when we will over communicate, people will also start learning the difference between all the kind of harassment
and what
happening.
is the step for each one.
Exactly.
And I think the other one they need to do is train your own HRs in being able to differentiate.
Exactly.
Many a times HR themselves get confused.
कि इसमें करना क्या है?
हाँ.
इसमें ये policy
Is
apply
this-
करना है या ये?
It's harassment. Should I put it under POSH or should I put it under HR investigation? Or what should I do? Or is it my code of conduct?
Yeah.
Which one is, where? So I think over communicating with HR also is important. Your own team, you need to teach them as to being confidently, being able to differentiate. And if they're not able to, please ask. I mean, ask somebody who has that expertise on how to do that. So I
Right.
think
So, Ambika, this is the end of our podcast, and we are going to start with a rapid fire question
Okay.
round with you.
without
And-
an hamper.
Without an hamper. We have not arranged any hampers for anyone.
Okay.
But lots of love to you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And our first question is there any trait of yours that is still work in progress?
Oh, many.
Okay, give us one.
I think I get very emotional when I'm addressing harassment cases, etc. Of course, while I clinically address them, etc., there are days that I keep thinking about it, and that's also because you tend to start relating and thinking from the victim's point of view, and sometimes unconsciously you take the victim home. So I think that's a work in progress. Other than that, there are many. Yeah? I mean, I'm trying to also listen to understand versus only listen to have
react.
people complete or react and respond. So I think for now I'll stop at
I
these
think
two.
two are good. Two are good. Yeah. So what's your favorite book?
Osho. So I love what he writes. And other than that, I love Haruki Murakami.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I love Simon Sinek. So I think there are multiple books that I like to read.
Awesome.
And any favorite quote?
Do the right thing. I mean, I don't know whoever wrote that, but whoever wrote that is
It's a nice thing. Do the right thing.
Do the
Yeah.
right thing.
It's the
That's
right
something
message.
so I think two statements that I really think of each time. One is do the right thing, and the other is bring your true self to work. So I think these two just resonate with me a lot of time.
So, is there any one message from your side to all the HR leaders who are going to be CHROs?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like giving a message
I
to.
mean, you were a CHRO and at a fairly young age you took that position. Is there any advice, if not message, anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't lose our authenticity, and not be bullied and pushed around by the leadership team members. And if you are a woman by any chance, then don't get threatened by being the first woman on the table, because that is going to pave way for a lot more women colleagues to come.
Yeah, be the first one on the table and speak up at
Yeah.
that table. I think that's
Yeah.
important.
Thank you.
No, I think I've been very, very fortunate having excellent male colleagues in the boardrooms who've, partnered very, very meaningfully and contributed to this growth journey. So I think thanks to all the men who've helped me in this journey.
I just want to hear from you, Ambika. If I talk about happiness, what does it mean to you in your personal life as well as at the workplace?
So happiness, my daughter is going to beat me for it, but happiness these days to me at my personal space is my four-legged baby that I've adopted. She's 1.5 years old. And I'm sure you can see the happiness in my
Yes,
eyes.
when
I
you're
think,
talking about it.
yeah, so she's made me fall in love very differently. So personal life happiness is this. Professionally, I like coming into work. I love being at my workplace. I love doing exactly what I'm doing, and this is what I want to do on my birthday, on my work anniversary. This is what I want to do on my last day of my life. I think these realizations have come very recent, but they have come with a lot of introspection. So I am doing absolutely everything that I like doing. I love the challenges, I love the pain, I love the stress. I love the ability to be able to influence and make change. So I think that is happiness.
Beautiful. And what are you doing to create that environment for your employees at the workplace?
When I joined Gourmet, I did realize and pick up the missing element of friendship. And I think that's what I'm catching on. And that's the theme for this quarter. So
Beautiful.
I'm trying to build meaningful friendships at workplace where, we are able to depend on each other for our personal and for our professional growth. And I think that'll help us build whatever next we want to build.
Today you watched Ambika Wadhwa, who was a total rock star. And keep watching OTP and keep sharing this OTP with your friends and colleagues.
Thank you for watching. I had a lovely conversation, and I'm sure you will enjoy the same listening in to Ambika Wadhwa. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel and keep listening.